Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark.
Hello, day, folks. Getting in the holiday season here. Today, we're going to talk about one of the vegetables that is sort of featured this time of year, and that's squashes. So we're going to talk about squashes and gourds. The big difference right off the bat on squashes is they were sort of discovered here in the New World, in Mexico, Peru, and eastern United States. Then they have records supposedly going back 5,000 to 10,000 years of the use, which would give it with the Incas and the Aztecs, and I'm sure. The gourds, on the other hand, are an old world vegetable that you mostly grew in the sort of the tropical or warmer areas of Europe and Mediterranean area and that type of thing. And the big difference is that the squashes are really almost edible, totally edible, but very various sizes and shapes and ways of preparing it. And the gourds mainly are decorative. They are not something eaten, although some of them, when they grow in the beginning and are young, some people ate them, but that's not what it is. But they played a big part in the sociological and folklore of the old days, and especially before religions were, they get myths about the size of the squash and the shape of it, and it devise all kinds of stories and mythologies about it. So anyway, the squash and squashes here really got distributed by Columbus when he came over in 1492. Having sailed the ocean blue, he took them all back to Europe. And of course, globalization sort of distributed them from there. The word pumpkin, which is probably one of the most popular of the squashes, really comes from the old Middle English word pompion. And it's via the Latin pepo and the Greek pepon. And that's where sort of the pumpkin came from. It's had its great place in history, and it's about the social history and folklore of but especially around New England, of course, for the Indians and the Pilgrims and the pumpkins. But and it's a fascinating thing to see them grow. It's sort of like a vine-like plant that develops a flower, and the flower comes out almost like a trumpet horn. And at the base of that flower is like a little bulb that sort of all of a sudden grows into these huge pumpkins. Now, the flowers themselves, especially in Italy, is a delicacy. They stuff them with cheeses, other different kinds of things. So they now have farms where they grew nothing but, raised enough for the pumpkin meats or that kind of thing, but just for the flowers.
The squash blossoms.
Squash blossoms, yeah. Then this little knob at the end of it grows from, and they're all part of the same family as watermelons and melons, and they're all the same. But the little thing grows into the size of, just keep going and going and big. It's amazing to watch. And those of you who are familiar with the fairs like the Topsfield Fair or the Eastern States Exposition, they have people who contest every year on the size of these pumpkins. Some of them are the size of small cars. They get them up to 1,500, 2,000 pounds.
Wow.
And it's a real trick. They develop special sheds to grow them in and fences around so people can't get at them. And they got to keep them out of the rain, because if they get too much rain, they tend to split. And so it's just an amazing thing. And anyway, the old settlers used them for all kinds of stuff, for beers, and breads, soups, and everything else. And one of the old Indian ways they used to do it, the Pilgrims picked up, was they take a squash, cut the top of it off, and then go in and scoop out the seeds and the stringy parts of it. And then they put in like milk and honey or maple syrup or other kinds of sugar and stuff, spices, put it back in, and then throw it bake it in the fire, into their wood fires or whatever else they were using. And then take it out, and of course, take it off and scoop it. That's probably like the prototype of a current day pumpkin pie, except the rind of the squash served like a pie crust, except you don't eat it. You just scrape out the now sweetened interior. Squashes really have two kinds. There's winter squash and summer squash. It's like the old story, summer squash, summer not. Well, that's right. The the summer squash are usually yellow squash and zucchini, and those are really eaten when they're very immature, and they're soft rind, soft inside, and fairly perishable. And they take 50 days basically to grow. All the other squashes, which are the hard ones, are mature in 100 days. They have very sturdy rinds, and they are not perishable. So that's the difference in the squash family itself. Of course, the ways of doing it are myriads of ways. A couple of interesting things that I've seen reading about them lately is Melissa Clark, who is a writer for the New York Times, has an article on the best way to prepare 3 kinds of pies, and one of them she talks about is pumpkin pie, but she doesn't use pumpkin; she uses butternut squash, and she says it's better. It has a better consistency, it's a flavor, and it's much easier to use because you can actually go to the store and buy a bag of cut peeled squash. So and she says the end result. And the other interesting thing that I read somewhere was Libby, who has the famous canned pumpkin pie mix. That's not really pumpkin. It is what they call Dickinson squash. And it has a better flavor, color, and consistency. They learned that a long time ago. And actually, that pumpkin pie filling, it's one of the few canned things that are equal or better to doing it fresh, because it doesn't, you don't get the canned taste because it's got all the spices in it and everything. So anyhow, those are just some little stories about it. I think the different kinds of squash, of course, we've got butternut squash, acorn squash, Hubbard squash, sugar pine, kabocha squash. But I think one of the more fascinating ones has to be the spaghetti squash. And I think you take that, and it's the size of a football. You cut it down the middle and take out the seeds, and then rub a little salt, pepper, and olive oil, then put it cut side down on a sheet pan and roast it for about 40 or 50 minutes. Take it out and let it cool. And this is a great thing, especially for kids, because the internal structure of this thing is mind-boggling. You just get a fork, you start pulling it, and you pull it. And it comes out in these tiers almost like lace as it unwinds. You end up with a pile of spaghetti, of squash spaghetti, that is probably 3 times the size of the container it came in. That's how neatly it's packed. And the kids love to see it. They can't believe you keep pulling it out. And that can be used almost any way that you use any other pasta dish. So for those who have gluten problems, the spaghetti squash can sort of fill the bill. I think it's best done with either the butter or brown butter and a little bit of parmesan. You don't want to put too heavy a sauce on it because it has a delicate flavor, but it can be used any way you want. Another way they use it is a turban squash, which I thought was kind of interesting. They cut the top off, and again, making a holder. They take rice, and whatever you use in a regular casserole, just put it inside and put the stock in it, whatever the ratio is, 3-to-1 to rice. And you put it in the oven and bake it, and you open it up, you get a risotto-like interior that you get with a regular casserole. So that could be a fun thing to do. It could be a nice presentation for somebody to be having a special dinner. But you can't, the ways of making it, using beers, coffee. This time of year, if you go to Trader Joe's, you walk in, everything is pumpkin this and pumpkin that, and orange flavors. They do everything with it. So this is the time you can use it. Another great, like an acorn squash, cut it in half, score the inside, and a little butter and sugar, and roast it. It's a beautiful side dish. And handling it sometimes with squash, because of their bulk and the toughness of the skin, some people throw it in the microwave. They'll score a little bit in the side, put it in the microwave for 5 minutes, and it softens the skin and lets you deal a little bit easier. When you're trying to carve a squash, especially a large one, you want to put it on a towel or dish towel, maybe sometimes damp, so it doesn't slide on you and you don't cut your hand digging into it. And from there on, the myriads of uses are just unimaginable. There's so many things, and it's a great time of year. The colors follow in the fall, the myriads of sizes and shapes, the varieties, the ethnic variations go on and on and on. So get together and use your local squashes and have fun getting ready for the holiday season.
All right. I promised my friend Jeff that we would address he and his mother's basting controversy. She, you remember his wonderful mother, loves to constantly baste the turkey, whereas he does not believe that is valuable and that you lose oven temperature. What is your take on the matter?
Basting, well, basting and marinating, some is good, some is bad. I think as far as the turkey is concerned, the brining, I think, is almost more effective than the basting is concerned. And as far as if he's worried about, I think basting keeps it moist because turkey tends to be dry. I read this morning someone who they don't use turkeys. They buy a couple of chickens and stuff them because they like the meat stays more moist than turkey does. But another way to solve the basting problem, if you're worried about temperature, is that some people take a piece of cheesecloth and soak it with butter or oil and lay it over the top of the turkey, especially in the latter part of the cooking.
Oh, that's
and
brilliant.
It's sort of self-based that way. That's another way.
That's
you can
fascinating.
do it. But you can do it, anytime you keep anything that tends to be dry, moist, there's going to be that. But I'm not too sure the opening and closing of the oven. How long does it take you to baste something? That should be one of those old basting tubes. It has like the bulb on the end. You put it in, you squeeze the bulb, and it sucks it in. Then you squeeze it on the turkey. That's just not going to take a long time to do. I haven't seen one of those for years. People used to all have those turkey bulbs, they call them, basting bulbs.
A diplomatic answer. Getting back to squash, I just was thinking as you were talking about the squash cocktail that I did for a restaurant here in Chicago that was the butternut squash with lime and a little bit of this chili liqueur. And it was really a terrific cocktail. It, kind of a pain for the kitchen because they had to keep roasting them, but people really enjoyed them. So I sort of doing a throwback today. I was at Whole Foods earlier and kind of hard up for something that I wanted to talk about, and I thought I would revisit a wine from the bistro days. And I thought that was a very interesting list that you had, and the degree to which Australia, New Zealand, and South America were very much underappreciated by the wine market at that point, and that became prime ground for you to find inexpensive bistro wines that were still really high quality because most of the Northern Hemisphere hadn't cottoned onto them. So one of the wines that you used to have, like always, was the Oxford Landing Sauvignon Blanc. This is from Riverside, Australia, and they're still reasonable. This was $8.99. And they actually do, they're very much about sustainable agriculture. They bought a huge amount of land around them and planted it to natural native flora and fauna, or trees rather. Can't plant animals, but they're a fairly serious operation, in the table wine sector, which is impressive. And the founder in 1958 was Wyndham Hill Smith, or as they call him, Windy, W-Y-N-D-Y, which I thought was absolutely wonderfully Australian. And also made me think of the, remember the record label?
Which
Wyndham
one?
Hill.
Oh, Wyndham Hill, yes. I was just thinking of that when you said
That was all the
that.
sort of easy listening piano stuff. Really nice nose, quite fresh. Really like an Anjou pear situation here. I've been eating a lot of pears recently, so I sort of have them on the mind. So. Yeah, very fresh, unpretentious. It almost seems like it has some oak on it, but I can't imagine they would do that. But in any case, it has kind of a Fumé Blanc character. So you're not getting that, Marlborough character, obviously they're neighbors. Much more of, it tastes like Fumé Blanc. It really tastes like a California Sauvignon Blanc, but still nice acidity, nice mouthfeel, and much like what's the wine you like? Bogle. Much like Bogle, you're getting a lot for the money. This is quite a good wine for $8.99.
Mentioning the bistro, I'm just thinking of a wine that would be fabulous with turkey, which I came across in one of my wine dinners, was from Southern Australia, a place called Capel Vale. And it was Capel Vale, and they had a Riesling. And but it was a dry Riesling. I never had tasted anything like it before. It sort of came on sort of fruity in a sense, but not then dry. But that would have been a sensational. I don't think I haven't seen the label for years. I don't know whether it's still in business or not, but that would be a great wine with turkey. Some people say Riesling is one of the ones that some people recommend with turkey, but this one with the coming off dry at the end would have been a perfect mix, a perfect match for it. So
yeah, I can still remember most of the labels. There, the Les Jamel, the Terradoro, that Firestone Chardonnay was delicious. There was that one nice couple who were regulars who always got that. Remember Joao and his girlfriend?
No, not really.
Well, you were in the kitchen. You wouldn't have known.
I was working.
Oh, classic back of house, front of house. Like what were we doing in the front? Our nails. Oh man.
You were socializing.
Yeah, you can take the chef out of the kitchen, but you can't take the chef out of the chef. Well, again, happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and then thank you for that primer on squash. I felt like I was speaking to an Oxford Don. Speaking of Oxford and their landings. Thank y'all. Thanks, Dad.
Just don't get squashed when you land.
Ah.